I want to welcome everybody to the speaker series that we've had. I want to give an update about the Go2030 comprehensive plan itself. We're probably about 2/3 of the way through the comprehensive plan. Again, starting back in April, we're hoping to have it wrapped up around March, I guess is the goal. We had our last public meeting in September, had a lot of great input. I think the plan itself is progressing along pretty well. One of the elements that we are asking people to comment on right now is on the MindMixer website. It's the Go2030 Town Hall. We're asking people to start to rank the key initiatives that have been brought forward. And so I want to really encourage folks to get on that website and make their wishes known in terms of how they want to rank those key initiatives. So I think it's very important that we continue to have that dialogue. If there's other ideas that are out there, by all means, get a hold of someone in the planning office. We've got a lot of folks that I think have been working very hard on this plan, and so we want to make sure that we've got everybody and their ideas presented. Tonight, it's really a joint session between the City of Fargo and the Plains Art Museum that I want to give a warm welcome to Rebecca Krinke. I understand she's an artist, a sculptor, landscape architect. She's also a professor at the University of Minnesota. So let's give her a nice warm welcome.
Thanks very much, and thanks everybody for coming. I know it's always a lot of work to come out after work and after dinner, and now it's dark very, very early, so I appreciate you coming out. And it's really a pleasure to be here in Fargo. I think it's just a beautiful city. I was talking about the beautiful downtown, the intact turn-of-the-century Main Street, and the other thing that's so incredible is the elm trees that you've somehow preserved. You probably worked very hard to keep these elms alive, so it's really an incredible landscape up here. So tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about my public art practice. It's a participatory practice, so maybe I'll have you participate a little bit. You know, we're from the upper Midwest, so nothing too touchy-feely, maybe just a little bit of participation. Hey, hi, thanks for coming. So the first, I'm actually going to talk chronologically, and I'm going to talk about a project that is set in an interior setting. I have got projects inside and projects outside. And this project is called The Table for Contemplation and Action, and I have a little parentheses, a place to share beauty and fear, and that sounds much more poetic, I think. But it has to do with this idea of writing and contact with nature. Why is that important? It's a sculptural table. It's got these 4 mismatched found chairs. It's got this big glass vessel that you can see there. And if you look carefully, you can see that there's writing starting to pile up, starting to accumulate in that glass vessel. And the center of it is a kind of moss garden. So it's kind of a sculptural table for this normal activity of writing, but the activity that people are invited to do is to really think about sharing something that's stressful to them, like to unburden stress by writing about it, placing it in this vessel, or to maybe write about something they hope or wish, however you want to use the table. And the reason that I really wanted to include this idea of contact with nature's been found to have a beneficial effect on human physical and psychological health. And I thought, man, Americans now spend 90% of our lives indoors. And you think about us up here in the Northland with our long winters. So, what about an innovative contact with nature? The dead rubber tree in the corner that we've all seen, that sort of doesn't make it anymore. You don't see that. So, so what else could be the manifestation for nature indoors if it's beneficial to our health? And writing. Research shows that writing that expresses emotions also has a beneficial effect on your health. So I thought, this table is in the courtyard of the College of Design at the University of Minnesota, filled with stressed out design students, graduate students that are there 24/7 working on all these projects. So I thought, well, it's an experiment. We'll see. Will they write? Will they deposit these writings into the vessel? There's a booklet on the table that explains about, my research interests and invites them to write. And that little black book that you just saw is also, besides explaining about the project, it's a comment book where I've actually had to put out a second comment book yesterday because it's full. The table's been out maybe a couple years now, and completely filled with writing. And you know, the design students are a tough audience. I thought, oh man, we're critical of them and their reviews, and they're going to be tough. Are they going to use this table? Are they going to use it? So it was really rewarding to read some of these things. Thanks for the opportunity to jettison extra thought baggage. I like the smell of pine in my hands because sometimes I've had pine needles, I've had moss. I change out the materials in the center so that they're always kind of being startled by, tree bark, some unusual contact with nature, so that they become aware of it. And you can read some of the other quotes. People were copying in quotes from Camus and Thoreau, and it was really, surprising when you try to get your design students to sometimes write a reflective piece in the studio. But here they were spending a lot of time with this comment book, and I've joked before, I don't want you to get the idea that every comment was like this. There were certainly some that said, could we, have beer? Could this involve beer in some way? So, but many of them were showing that the table was actually effective in the way it was intended. But I also write in the comment book, look, you can sit and eat, you can do whatever you want at this table. You can use it. And so this is really, how it looks much of the time. Students are just having meetings and eating and that kind of thing. And for the first time, and after a couple years, I saw two people at the table. It was on Halloween, and they had the slips of paper that are in the drawers of the table, and they were poised to write a message to the vessel. And they were looking at each other like, what are we going to write? And I really wanted to take a photograph of them, but they had like a little Bo Peep costume on and a sheep or something. I mean, they were in their Halloween costume. I thought, well, it might look a little strange. But it was the first time I'd actually kind of caught somebody in the act of writing. I think my students have been telling me, we come down at midnight and put into that thing. But I just want to comment about some things that did surprise me. I mean, I was surprised that it actually seems to be effective and adopted and well-liked or loved and used. But one day I came down and somebody had put this makeshift vase, leaving this flower at the table, meaning like, it evoked something where they wanted to, the table was doing something a little more magical than I could have expected. One day somebody left this book of hours or book of Psalms or something, and you kind of think, is that lost and found? But one day it was the book of hours, and another day it was the book of Psalms or something like. So people were almost saying like, this is a kind of numinous spot, and perhaps, and something you can't really, I don't think, plan for or design for. But there are vast amounts of spaces inside our buildings that I think are underutilized, generic, and dull. And so here's this courtyard with almost nothing in it. And I thought, we don't always have the budgets to go make brand new, amazing, giant projects. But this table, this overlay into existing space, not very expensive, and look at the impact it's had. It's kind of really, really startled me. So the vessel is piling up with messages. I devised this tool to collect the messages and put it into this copper bowl. Maybe you can see on the table it says burning of the messages. So the social contract is that I will burn the messages. I won't read them. If you want to curse the dean or whatever you need to do, I won't read them, and they're burned. So, but the students have seen that I'm going to burn, and they're running down to write more messages to put into the container, okay? And because it's a public ritual. So this student wanted to carry the bowl of messages, and we went outside and we burned it. And they really seemed to find this quite rewarding. I mean, one of the women was saying, this is just so helpful for me, and it's just sort of surprising to see, like a student kind of tearing up, like it, made an impact. We're all pretty stressed out, and we all get pretty caught up in our day-to-day life, and this was just this little moment of, like the talk is called the emotional landscape, finding a moment to honor that or share a moment or find a moment of empathy, I think is very, because we're all in that building together so much of the time, and it was quite meaningful for all of us there. So this is the second project I'm going to talk about, and I'm not going to fill a whole hour and a half, but that'll be good. You guys have come out after work, or I could slow down. I was saying to Colleen, I've had to give so many 5 or 10-minute talks lately. It's all about the elevator speech. This project I'll spend a little bit more time on maybe, or slow down. It's called The Mapping of Joy and Pain. And well, you know, what is it? It's, in a way, it's exactly what it says. This is what the sculptural environment looks like, and it's literally a big table, kind of like that previous table, only that table started almost from a research question, like how can contact with nature be reinvented? How can this idea of writing be reinvented? This was like, I never really get to interact with the people who write for that table. I kind of had a hunger to talk more with my audience. It was really just an experiment. I'd never done anything like this mapping before. So there's a big map that was portable, a map, laser-cut map of Minneapolis and St. Paul to scale with all the streets labeled, you know, sort of the standard city map. And joy and pain, those sculptural dark and gold sort of speak to joy and pain, sort of call attention to the table. And these are my 4 student assistants making the very first marks on the map. And literally, the public is invited to color gold where they've experienced joy and gray where they've experienced pain. However they'd want to define that right on the map. So we as facilitators mostly just help them find an address, or, you know, we didn't define that for them. So this just kind of covers, it was last summer, it was the summer of, well, actually it was the summer of 2010. So the map table moved around to different public parks in Minneapolis and St. Paul. So it was temporary, just up for a few hours. We'd take it down, it went to another park, so it traveled. It was deliberately a sculptural and physical setting in an era of, you know, going online and putting a pin in a Google map. I mean, it was deliberately trying to be about the physical and, you know, our bodies and face-to-face instead of just, you know, when you blog, it's all the same font and you can be anonymous. And I don't know, this was just about creating a kind of new temporary shared public realm. It was participatory because, you know, they made the map. And the map, the accretions, you know, it wasn't erased. The map went around with those layers each time. And it was facilitated by us, meaning we helped them find, we answered questions, we told them about the project, we helped them find addresses. So this is what it looks like. It was about 7 or 8 feet long. It's really large. You can, if you're familiar at all with the Twin Cities, those are the Minneapolis lakes. Downtown, you see the Mississippi River, so St. Paul is that part of the map. And some of the very first markings of where people felt joy were along the lakes and along the river. But that big patch of gold between the 2 lakes, that's Lakewood Cemetery. I wouldn't have necessarily thought that would be a place of joy, but maybe of healing or saying goodbye, or who knows. But and you'll see some dark hospitals and some roads, and there's some dark up there. The University of Minnesota sadly has a lot of has a lot of dark gray. There's some gold too, but I guess what was so surprising to me, I you know, for me, thinking about my other table, I thought, well, it would be so interesting to meet my public a little bit, but I'm kind of secretive in a certain way, and I thought, well, they'll just come up and they'll color. You know, that'll be really interesting or fun, or, you know. But what I didn't expect was people started to talk almost immediately about, that really surprised me. I mean, us, you know, upward, you know, here's where I quit drinking. You know, here's where you know, the stories that would just start instantly, or here's where my daughter was born, such a place of joy. And then at the same hospital, somebody's coloring pain because it's where their daughter died. And the 2 of them are like, oh my God, you know, maybe we're here to balance each other today. I mean, it was just mind-boggling, the stories that would come out in these sort of shared moments. And if you can see, there's people of different ages and, you know, people that would never meet otherwise. So, for example, this is, this kid, you can see he's got the joy color in one hand and the pain color in another hand, and his mom is talking to him about, hey, let's map gold where we live. Let's map joy at our house. And, there is a lot of joy at people's houses, which was great. But then this little kid was saying, I'm here at Minnehaha Falls, and I was really terrified of that giant waterfall. And when I walked on that trail, Mom, I felt like, I was slipping and falling, and I felt a lot of fear. So he wanted to color pain, and they had this conversation, this mother-son conversation about joy and pain. It was, kind of unusual that the map started to spark a little bit different kind of conversation than I'd ever maybe overheard with, a parent and a kid. So kids really got it. I mean, in a way, it's really simple, right? Joy, pain, gray, gold. But there's a lot of sort of layers to this and a lot of sort of nuanced things that would start to bubble up. So here's, this is just I have a blog that collects all these stories, but you can read some of the, I put down a few, just hand me the gray. Here's where I saw an angel, an emotional experience. This is where I hung out when I was homeless as a teenager, and she was mapping gold, and I said, that's the joy color. She goes, oh yeah, I felt really safe here at this park, and I felt really good. So there's just stories after stories, and this fellow who's mapping right in this photograph, I mean, he had a lovely conversation. He was talking about how happy he was. He had moved. He had found this new house. His neighbors were fantastic, and he just wanted to map all this joy. And, we had a great conversation with him, and this is at Como Lake in St. Paul. So then he went off with his dog, and they walked around the lake. And then he said, he came back, and he said, I spent the whole time walking around the lake thinking about joy. And he goes, I want to map more joy. And I thought, you know what? That is pretty profound in a way. How often do we think about joy? And, we've had another person after she stood here for a while and mapped, she said, you know what? I don't have enough joy in my life. That was pretty incredible, too. There's some really, amazing things that came out of this. And I'll tell you a few more stories, perhaps. I mean, this is in St. Paul, and, people live in the parks. I had never sat and talked with people that are homeless, and I found myself talking to a lot of people that were homeless. I didn't know they were homeless till they started to talk to me about which shelters they felt a sense of joy or a sense of pain. This is a law student talking to a city official, a man who's homeless, a student. This group actually wanted to pick up the map and turn it so it would be oriented the same way that the map was in St. Paul. So they had a big discussion about the map and shouldn't it be. So I'm like, okay, let's try that. This is at a high school kids. I hadn't spent a lot of time in North Minneapolis. I got an invitation to go and to do this mapping of joy and pain, and I thought that was really, really powerful. The kids really, in fact, it was interesting to see how much joy they mapped. They would map, some people had mapped pain in certain parts of North Minneapolis, and these kids took their gold and they're like, we see it differently, and they were coloring over, so you could, the pencils had literally been tested so you could color over or add, or if somebody couldn't come to the map, we brought it to them. So now you can see how big the map is. So I thought, maybe I'd just tell one more, maybe so many stories, but I think a story that was really, really profound for me was, we're standing around the map, maybe a dozen people at Minnehaha Falls, and this one guy starts to talk about how, he's mapping joy because he was talking about how he made a lot of money at this certain place. But then his girlfriend says, well, you were dealing drugs. And he's like, oh, yeah. So maybe there's some pain with that. And he's like, and then he's like, oh, yeah, I overdosed, I OD'd on heroin here. But then, he picks up the gold, but then somebody called 911 and they brought this life-saving, and then this trying to think of the name of the drug, and then this other guy across the table, he names the drug, and he goes, which I can't remember the name of, he goes, oh yeah, that happened to me too. So I mean, here's this table of like 12 people hearing this story about heroin overdosing, and just regular folk, you know, I'm like, people take heroin? So I was like, this is really quite profound. And then these two young guys were kind of looking at each other like, hey, we made it, and kind of like no shame, and we did it. And one of the guys said, yeah, I quit drugs after that. And it was like this moment where it was like this social space, this emotional social space was created where we kind of looked at each other like, wow, we really felt privileged that they felt they could say that. And I think everybody there had a sense of empathy, like we've all been in situations, so it was this really powerful thing that I could not have imagined, happening. And those stories just kept coming. So what I thought might be kind of fun, maybe not, but the teacher in me, I just thought, you know what, and being a sculptor, I wanted to make something. So I thought maybe if we could, make, these are sticky cards, and I thought maybe if you guys would make a gold one, and we could write about joy. That's okay. Does everybody have pens and stuff? We have a whole bunch of pens. Okay, so if you don't have a pen, I have a pen. So here's what I'd like you to write. Here's your question. Let's write about joy first. Okay, so how about you write down the first thing that comes to mind when I say write down a place where you've experienced joy. Even though this isn't very Nordic of us to talk about. You don't have to turn them in or read them or anything. Okay, did everybody write something down? Okay, how about this? If you did not write a place in Fargo, could you write down a place where you've experienced joy, happiness, contentment in Fargo? I assume you all wrote Fargo in your first one, but just in case you wrote Hawaii or something, let's go to Fargo. See what happens if, why don't we do the same thing? On the dark colored one, write about a place that first pops into your mind when you think about a place you've experienced pain or stress. And probably it's just everybody's job? No, that's a leading question. Pain or stress? Just that first thing that pops into your mind. So you get to write anything on the first one. First thing that pops into your mind when you think about a place of pain in your life. And then let's do the same for the second part. Let's bring it back to Fargo. A place where you felt stress or a stressful place in Fargo. Okay, so we'll come back to this at the end. I just we can discuss whoever wants to say anything or not, or we'll just come back to that at the end of the talk, which is coming up rapidly. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions right now, since we're doing kind of a halftime? Stevie? What happened to the map? Well, I'm glad you asked, because just today, the Borchert Map Library at the U of M put it on the wall. So it's kind of like an artifact now. I guess I thought after the summer of mapping, you know, people have been asking me, bring it back out, but it kind of felt like it was that event, so it's on the wall of the map library. But, you know, the map librarian and I are kind of hatching up. Maybe there's some things that could happen. You know, maybe everybody wants to do something digital. I don't know. There's pros and cons to, like, trying to make this interactive. They are labeled. And it's to scale, and they are labeled. You have to, yep, they're in there. But now that the map's on the wall, I'll take some really good photographs and try to understand each neighborhood even more clearly, you know, where the conglomerations of pain and joy are. Any other thoughts right now, or Megan?
As an artist, you know, there's an art.
Yeah.
But so like so many social media artists,
Mm-hmm.
who are the creators?
Mm-hmm.
Who would you say are the creators? I mean, I know there's a small
Mm-hmm.
academic discussion.
Well,
What do you think?
you know, like I said, this was really an experiment for me. I'd never gone out and engaged the public like this before. You know, even as a designer in community meetings, it's not like this. Because this was like, they're making the map. You know, I set up a condition and I invited their participation, but really they were making the map. So the artwork is kind of about that engagement and that conversation, the setting, you know, and now it's an artifact. But I think a huge part of the art was just our relationship in a way. I guess what was kind of fascinating was that, you know, people would look at previous marks too, and they would start to make up stories, you know, speculate, like why was there pain here? And they would start to, well, maybe, I think I heard about a car accident there, or blah, you know, so it was storytelling, you know, it was mapping their own truth in a way, but it was also storytelling and imagining and speculating and asking me, you know, who made those marks and what did I think they meant, and did the person tell me? Many people just came by this, but some made it almost like an appointment. They read about where the map was going to be. Like this one fellow walked up and he had a symbol all devised with like a circle and arrows and concentric, and there was a mixture. He had already figured out the gold parts and the gray parts. So you can see his sort of tracks over the map and the different proportions of gray and gold. So it's really, you know, and one woman just silently came up and shook my hand and mapped and left. And, you know, another woman said, oh, I'm running to Chicago for a plane, but can you bring this to Chicago? And she's hugging me. And I thought, you know, this is very unusual. I mean, I could not have been more surprised. So I'll just give you a few glimpses. You know, here's at the Walker, the fellow in the black T-shirt. My student was saying, do you mind if I film while you map? And it was interesting. All these young men wanted to map, and the guy said, do I mind? I insist upon it. I mean, he just was like loving the fact that he, you know, because everyone's equally important. You know, emotions, you know, we all get to feel what we feel about a place. It's not about intellectual or, you know, what the zoning or what, you know, everybody's equal. And I think that really struck a chord with people. Here's some teenagers. This fellow with the hat, he specifically said, oh, I don't want a map. And that was unusual. Almost everybody who came to the map mapped, but before I knew it, he started mapping. You know, people would stay a lot of times, you know, a half hour or so. And I thought, wow, I finally found somebody who's not going to map. But he did. Little kids. Well, gold, I don't know. Gold feels, I don't know, joyful and, I don't know, Byzantine and mosaics and Egyptian tomb. I don't know, it seems kind of like the glory of gold. I don't know, it seems glorious or beautiful to me. And gray, you know, sometimes a gray day or a gray mood or, you know. But you're right, it could be anything. I thought it was beautiful and it kind of resonated with me. And since I got to make it, as Megan said, And my students, we were experimenting a lot with the colors so you could blend, you know, because a lot of times pain and joy would be at the exact same place, or you yourself felt pain and joy. It's not this either or, right? It's like the guy with the heroin. I had all this joy, he thought, making all this money and doing all this, but and then he was recovered. So he was mapping joy and pain at the same place. Now these little kids, that was actually pretty interesting because these were the guys saying, you know, lots of pain, lots of pain, lots of pain, and they were coloring in their school with gray. So I don't know if they were bullied or what, but it was really, you know, I mean, it's an interesting planning or sociological, you know, what was happening with these guys that they felt, or maybe they're just kids, right? But on the other hand, that's pretty interesting. So there was, I mean, they knew where their school was, and that's what they were mapping. So, you know, it really kind of generated this compassion. I was like, hey, you guys, you know, what's going on? So sometimes I would engage like that. Yep, there he is. This was interesting, a really different idea about what was joy and pain in their life. You could kind of catch that couple, you know, at a moment of negotiating. You know, and here's me with, you know, these guys were, I'm like, they were mapping their mosque. And, you know, I'd never, you know, Minneapolis has a big Somali community. I'd never talked to anybody from the Somali community. So it was really, really interesting and important for me to talk with these guys. And I think for other people to talk with them and hang out with them as well. So what happened? So I felt like, you know, as I told you guys, that this was an experiment for me. I expected it to be rather silent. I did not expect it to be this shared social space for emotional engagement about empathy and really, I think, catharsis for a lot of people. I noticed that it triggered memories for a lot of people. They would see somebody's markings or they'd overhear something, and then that would trigger a memory for them, and they go, oh yeah, I want to map that too. Or I hadn't thought about that in a long time. You're right. Where was that? You know, people would start talking to each other. People would start talking to other people about memories they'd had of their neighborhood. You know, they'd find out they'd lived by each other, things like that. So then there's this idea of testifying and witnessing. I don't know. I feel like sometimes I was, you know, the witness. I mean, I did talk and I did ask questions, but a lot of times I was witnessing something. And, you know, that's very therapeutic to speak and to really be listened to. I think that's very powerful and very overlooked, you know, and just as simple as that, you know, as, you know, also coming from a design background, you know, these community meetings, sometimes we don't listen enough. Just simply listen. Just ask simple questions and listen. So it was a place for private reflection too. You know, as I said, some people came and didn't talk. Speculation and imagination about what happened here, why is this happening, what could have happened. And the last thing I wrote down about this was that it was a place of transformation. And I'm speaking really kind of for myself, but that I felt really transformed by this, to tell you the truth, which I did not expect. I felt that I just, you know, there'd be, like, this guy came up in St. Paul and he said, I want to color all of St. Paul gray. I am being evicted from my house. The cops want me to leave town. I have an outstanding whatever. Because we had said, hey, do you want to see our map? And they came over, and my student and I are there, and we told him about the map, and he starts telling us this, and he wants to map the whole city gray, and he goes, well, I won't do that. This map is too beautiful, but I'll color a big gray spot where my car is and where I'll be leaving town tonight. And I'm like, man. And he goes, and he shakes our hand. He goes, you know what? No one's ever asked me how I feel. I felt like, you know, that he wasn't a true citizen, like that like his voice was never heard or valued. And I started to feel like I mean, it sounds kind of corny, but I really started to think, like, it's amazing things work as well as they do out there. The stories that are embedded in all of us with so much trauma and pain and, you know, a little kid who's asked me to map the hospital where his dad died on the 4th of July, asked me to put pain on that. I mean, it's amazing it all works as well as it does. I really had a profound respect, actually, grow for my fellow citizens. And I had the feeling, you know, if there could be more you know, there's something about this that's just, if that quality could grow in all of us, wouldn't that be a powerful thing? So I felt really transformed, which I did not expect. So I have two other short things to talk about, just short, and then we can have a little conversation. I did this project that was a gallery show called Visitation, but it came after the Mapping of Joy and Pain, and I thought, I just can't give up going out into the world. So I arranged now it's monthly, but last February it was every week. Every Saturday I arranged for a visitation, I called it. So the first one was, we went in northeast Minneapolis. There's a lot of Ukrainian churches and immigrants, and this is, well, Nina, so the idea is you go to a place that you normally maybe wouldn't know about or go to, and you hear from someone at that place a story that relates to that place, a person you normally wouldn't meet or know about. So Nina was telling us that she was kidnapped at the age of 16 by German soldiers as she walked to school, and she was put on a cattle car to Germany, and she was forced to be a slave laborer until the end of World War II. And she said 2 million Ukrainians were forced into slavery like that. I thought, well, I had no idea. I had no idea. I mean, it was just opened up a completely new window, and she wasn't even able to see her mother till 1994. I mean, there wasn't even a way she never saw her family until 1994. So when was she kidnapped? In the 40s, right? So there wasn't even a way for a long time for her to let her family know she was alive. So that's kind of the idea behind visitation, going out to places we wouldn't go and learning things that we wouldn't learn from the people themselves. So it's very simple. This one, we went to a Zen center. Sometimes it was people that would offer to do a visitation, so I would take them up on it, places I hadn't been. So I just thought this was interesting. You can see the little comment that somebody emailed me. Today punched a hole in the stagnant air I sometimes get too used to. Thanks for a great day. So the idea is kind of a simple public art project, costs no money, right? But we're going out into our community and we're learning about our community. We're learning the stories that aren't visible, kind of like the mapping, the things that aren't visible. And again, I think it fosters a lot of, an enlarged worldview. It's exciting too to break out of your rut. I think if I didn't schedule these every month, it forces me to. Otherwise, I'm sitting and watching the football games every Sunday, that kind of thing, or working hard. So the Fort Snelling, many places. So still going out every month. There's a blog about that too. If you go to my website, you can click on Mapping of Joy and Pain blog and the Visitation blog. So this is the last project, and it's about writing again. And it's just me being interested in going out into the community at like literally no cost. What needs to be said? So I post these on telephone poles, and I have a pencil hanging there. And the question is, what needs to be said? You're invited to write it here. And the top line says, do you have stress to unburden? A joy to be celebrated? And it says, thank you for writing. So I've just been doing this in the past couple weeks, and this is pretty filled with writing. So you can see stress to unburden midterms. I hate midterms. I have an issue with friends and family. Under joy, the University of Michigan is recruiting me to grad school. They're paying me to go on a visit. And the place I live this weekend. So I put this up by campus, and to tell you the truth, I expected the writing to be about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and I was really like, wow, people are really, there was sex, drugs, and rock and roll on a different one, but for some reason this one attracted, just people really being thoughtful and really, I think finding some benefit in that. So here's another one, stress, give stress to unburden. Something about people aren't smiling. What's up with that? Get the bikes off the sidewalk. I need a bus stop by Kaufman. Joy. I just got a child-sponsored. I just got Jamba Juice. Yay. But they would be this full after a day. I have to say, I was really surprised because, you know what students are like. They're always texting and they're on their phones. And I put one up by St. Anthony, Maine, and yesterday I saw this like really young, hip, cool woman she stopped and she was writing. It was packed with text. So I think I'm going to just keep it up and put up another one and see how full I can get. And so this is the first part of I've also put them up more out in the country. But it's the first part of a larger idea. I'd like to make a kind of temporary, movable writing room where you could go inside and write in private. Maybe the messages accumulate if you don't want to make them public, but they're seen, maybe like the first table. But maybe like you guys, you've written, and maybe that could get pinned to the walls of the room or the walls of a gallery. But I'd really like to be outdoors, and this time I might actually try to work with like a veterans group. I think a veterans group to joy and pain or stress, and I think there's actually a lot of veterans that are students too. And then the other group, there's a project called New Neighbors and Hidden Scars. The Somali population, like over 50% of the population has been tortured. And there's a project to try to, there's many projects to try to think about that. And, it might be interesting if these projects are amenable to it, to go and work maybe with specific groups. So that's an interest I have, is kind of this writing room, this portable writing room. So that's the end of my talk. And I thought what we might do is, if people can stay just a couple minutes, I'm just curious, how many people wrote about, on the card,